the immediate validity of a repressive rule. You couldn't. I mean, from a traditional perspective, you couldn't. But opor si muove. I mean, at the end of the day, that happened to be very efficient, and so that created a new path, a new strategy, and many. So there has been for a long time. Now it was 30 years. Has been a kind of a learning process by which these agents, not only the prosecution service, but all NGOs too, they learn how to use these legal tools in order to create new possibilities of protecting social rights.
Hi, I also have a question that ties in with the last part you mentioned. The second best option can sometimes be the best option. The inherent compromise there, does it also mean that they then stop and do not strive for the best option anymore? Does it turn into a permanent solution for a problem, or is it just an intermediary position, and then will they continue on striving for the best option in which all, both environmental and social aspects, other social aspects are taken into account?
Yeah, oh, wonderful question. I mentioned this in my paper. Well, economists used to separate two different kind of strategies of local development. One they call the high road strategy, and the other one they used to call low road strategy. The low road strategy means simply that you make so many flexibilizations of the rulings of the enforcement, and that you really create a nightmare for over-exploitation of some community. So, and this is something that certainly has happened in many different areas of Brazil. But they usually call our attention also for another kind of strategy. That's what they call high road strategy, which is a strategy in which you start by creating some flexibility, so lowering the standards of enforcement, of repression, in order to start a kind of virtual circle that will allow the local development to take this high road path. I think that what's interesting about Toritama case is that it has produced, if you compare Toritama with the neighborhood cities, it has created a kind of high road path. But it wasn't really clear at the moment that the prosecutor or the SEBRAE, the Small Business Firm Association, started this strategy. It wasn't really clear whether it would lead to a low road strategy or to a high road strategy. So there was, in a way, an inevitable, let's say, bet, or in sense, you have to evaluate your chances. As much as you, for example, when you try to balance the modified chairs that I mentioned, there's always some bet, whether the strategy of compensation strategy that you use, to take the horse from one of the players, is it enough or not? Because there's some sense that there's a prediction in the future. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that this is, one, inevitable, and second, that we have to have the skills to make this kind of choice soundly. So it's inevitable on one hand, and if you simply avoid changes because this could lead to a low road strategy, this would probably have been a mistake, at least in cases like Toritama. So legal experts should have the skills for analyzing and to make a sound prediction of what will be more probably successful in different settings.
Thank you, Professor, for coming to speak with us today. I had a quick question. I like this idea of kind of negotiating with legality, allowing this flexibility in the application of the law in order to both achieve legal and economic development. But the question I have is specifically, what kind of monitoring does this require? Because hold on, I'm sorry, let me check my, what kind of monitoring does it require with the selective application of the law to avoid it turning into kind of corruption and whatnot? Because, I mean, selective application of the law sounds, you know, like what the mafia does and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to always have in mind that there is no one-size-fits-for-all formula. So in some cases, of course, I mean, if you have if all the institutions are corrupt, I mean, there will be no chance. If you have probably maybe a repressive alternative would be better, if possible, because I mean, enforcing repressive legislation is not so easy, especially when the institutions are corrupt. So this is a kind of vicious circle. But I think that what is important for those interested in making research is to understand what are the alternatives in a local setting. It seems that at Toritama there were some alternatives. There was a prosecutor, a well-intended and very engaged person. His leadership, his character was very important for understanding what has happened there. So he was an asset available in that setting. And I think that this is important at the micro level. And what kind of monitoring? Of course, I mean, even in Toritama, it's very important to notice that, for example, the Federal University played and SEBRAE, that small business association that is funded by the Brazilian government, has played a very important role in monitoring the process. But what's also interesting, and many other empirical studies showed, is that from a certain time on, this monitoring became self-regulated. So there are some situations in which the incentives that one experience creates can allow us to create a self-regulatory system. But there are others which are not possible, in which it's not feasible. And I think it's important to notice too, which is the case shows that there was no one single actor. I mean, I've given a lot of importance to the prosecutor, but he was not the only one. The labor inspectors played a very important role too. The environmental inspectors also played a very important role. The tax inspectors also played, and the mayor. So what is interesting is to notice that not just because the one agency that was supposed to be in charge with the whole problem, I mean, environmental secretary of the state of Pernambuco, that I mean, things didn't change whenever we think like this. I mean, there is one agency that is in charge of doing this, and what this flexible and street-level regulators kind of interconnection shows us is that there are also second-best institutions that can be able to deal with this whole process. So there's never just one